Are your ad campaigns lighting up the dashboard, but not the pipeline? That's bullspend, and marketers are calling it out in Dashboard Confessions.
My boss asked for results, so I opened my dashboard for the only positive-sounding metric I had: impressions.
Cut the bull spend. See revenue, not just reach. LinkedIn delivers the highest return on ad spend of major ad networks. Advertise on LinkedIn. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a $250 credit. Go to linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
The road to the NBA Finals ends here, with star guards setting the tone. The Cavs eye another upset, while the Knicks carry the dreams of all of New York. The Eastern Conference Finals continue on ESPN and ABC.
Welcome to 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. I'm your host, Brian Slagel. I am the CEO of Metal Blade Records. The next time you're in Las Vegas, or if you currently live in Las Vegas or the Las Vegas area, you need to visit the Metal Blade Museum. Now, not only are there artifacts from Metal Blade artists like Metallica, Slayer, Cannibal Corpse, Gwar, Lizzie Borden, there's also artifacts from bands that we had something to do with as well, like Guns N' Roses, Megadeth, Alice in Chains, Deep Purple, Thin Lizzy, Alice Cooper, all sorts of stuff. So it's a really great metal museum. It's located right near the Strip in Las Vegas. Also, our retail store is also now in the museum. So you can go pick up your Metal Blade vinyl, CDs, collectibles, shirts, all sorts of cool stuff. Just go to metalblade.com/museum for all the details. And we're getting down now to the last 20 songs in this podcast. We've upped the ante now where these songs have to be extra important, I think. And today we're going to talk about Queensryche, and it's really difficult to figure out what song because there's so many songs. Like we could do 20 different podcasts on different amazing Queensryche songs. But we narrowed it down to Roads of Madness. And because it's an amazing song, of course, and my favorite song, and also our guest today, Adam Wodon's favorite song, and he's a huge Queensryche fan. So we kind of came to the consensus, like, let's talk about this song because it is an important song. It's a little bit different. It's a little longer. There's a lot of elements of very progressive and heavy stuff that was kind of early before some of the, bigger, heaviest stuff came after. So I think it fits in with what we're doing, and it'll be a fun podcast. We're going to talk to Zeuss, the producer, who's produced the last 3 Queensryche records, including the last one, which is amazing, Digital Noise Alliance. Check that out. It's so good. And of course, Adam Wodon, who's a huge Queensryche fan and also does the College Hockey News and a bunch of other stuff. But we begin it all, as we always do, with Mr. Martin Popoff.
Absolutely, Brian. The immense Queensryche with the more immense Roads to Madness. 9 minutes and 40 seconds. Last song on the warning. This is the Problematic album. Controversial. They're recording with James Guthrie. They were never happy with a mix on this. They go $300,000 over budget on this album. They're recording in England. Big, huge, expensive album for this hyped band. But it does go gold. This is upon the strength of Empire. I mean, we've got a gold. Even the EP goes gold. Rage for Aura goes gold. But we've got a triple platinum album for Queensryche, and then they even have a platinum after that. So very successful band. This is like a more Fates Warning kind of massive, almost a doom ballad, a power ballad, because for a long stretch of this, I mean, it is slow and doomy, great introspective lyrics. We've got a group writing credit here. 3 of the guys, DeGarmo, Jeff Tate, and Michael Wilton on this. So yeah, it just kind of goes along in this doomy kind of Fates Warning sort of vibe. Big drums, trudging. You actually get even a little bit of a Heaven and Hell bass line to open things up. But then there's this big ending at about 5:33 on this song. And then surprisingly, there's a bunch more, even more mellow and psychedelic music. But then you get what you kind of expected. You get the big, Iron Maiden fast section in here. And that goes for a while, and that's really cool. It's a nice payoff. It's a little bit of the whole Sweet Home Alabama sort of formula. I mean, this is Iron Maiden's barely, kind of going at this point. Iron Maiden's even still a new band at this point. But then we go back into the slow stuff for the big wrap up of it. So yeah, it's a song with a lot of weight, affected a lot of people. People love this song on here, and it's great, like a 10-minute epic on the album. And like I say, just relentlessly progressive metal, this band, the second biggest progressive metal band of all time after Rush, and we've got Fates Warning on Metal Blade Records, of course, operating at the same time kind of thing, and just sort of getting their thing going at this point. Yeah, absolute classic. Yeah, from September 7th, 1984 on The Warning. And I think a lot of people love this album. It's really the first full-length album after the EP. It sounds very different from the EP, sounds very different from Rage for Order. In some ways, it's kind of their most traditionally, would you say, produced heavy metal album, but even still they did find problems with it, and there was a lot of stress by going so far over budget on this thing. So absolute classic, Roads to Madness.
Tomorrow morning is knocking. Stock your fridge now. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or a sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. The Four Seasons is back for season 2, starring Tina Fey, Will Forte, Coleman Domingo, Marco Calvani, Carrie Kenny Silver, and Erica Henningsen. After a difficult year, your favorite group of friends continues their tradition of vacationing together, now with a baby in tow. From the Jersey Shore to upstate New York and Italy, their getaways are sure to take unexpected turns where comedy ensues. Watch The Four Seasons May 28th only on Netflix.
Experience a membership that backs what you're building with American Express Business Platinum. Get 2 times membership rewards points per dollar on eligible purchases in key business categories, as well as on each eligible purchase of $5,000 or more, on up to $2 million in eligible purchases per calendar year. American Express Business Platinum. There's nothing like it. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum.
Thanks, Martin. Always a lot of good information. And thanks for the shout out to Fates Warning and Metal Blade. I appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, he's right about everything. And I'd kind of forgotten about the controversy. We'll get into a little bit of that with Zeuss, which we're going to talk to now. All right. Well, we welcome in for the first time on this podcast a producer that, let me just get some of this stuff here. This could take an hour, so I'm gonna have to reduce the amount because there's so many here. But he's worked with Rob Zombie, Demon Hunter, Twisted, Throwdown, Whitechapel, Revocation, Hatebreed, Black Veil Brides. I mean, I could go on and on and on here. There's so many bands. D. Snyder. And of course, he's done the last 3 Queensryche records, which we're going to talk about today. Queensryche, obviously, including the last one, which is Digital Voice. I would put this record up with the first 4 Queensryche records. That's how good this last Queensryche record is. It's so incredible. And we welcome in the man who produced that record and all the other ones, Mr. Zeuss. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, and nice compliment on the Queensryche's DNA record. That was one epic thing that we put together with all kinds of different twists and turns, and we're all pretty happy with that one.
Digital Noise Alliance. I always screw that name up for some reason. Yeah, so good. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's a brilliant record. Talking about Queensryche, it's always difficult to go back, at least for me, because I'm a massive fan. And in doing this podcast, okay, we've got to pick a song that evolves into this 100 songs to define heavy metal theme. And I talked to my good friend Adam Wodon, who's actually a college hockey guy, but he's a massive Queensryche fan, like massive fan. So we're kind of talking like, where do we go? Do we go Mindcrime? Where do you want to go? And we kind of talked about it for a while. And he came up with this song, which is Roads to Madness, which is my favorite Queensryche song as well. So I'm like, let's do that because of a couple of things. Number one, it's a really long song, and this was not long and super progressive, which was not really the case of what was happening a lot when this record came out in the early 1980s. And it's, I think it's one of their signature songs. So when did you first hear and get into Queensryche?
The first time I heard them was on college radio, I think in like maybe 7th grade or whatever. And it was Take Hold of the Flame was the first song that I ever heard. So that was what hooked me. And then I went backwards and listened to then I bought the EP and of course the Warning. And so that's where it started for me, was Take Hold of the Flame. And I used to record the college radio stations when I was a kid, like on cassette. A lot of times too, the shows were really late. So it's like, all right, it's 1 a.m. I got to go to school in the morning. And it's like, I just hit record. And the next day I would play back what I missed. And it was definitely Take Hold of the Flame.
That's a good starting point. That's a very good starting point. There's another song we talking about as well. So production wise, obviously they put the EP out themselves and it sounded pretty good for, basically a small independent EP, but then they get signed to EMI, a bigger budget. And all of a sudden we've got James Guthrie coming in, the producer who did The Wall by Pink Floyd. And he's done a lot of really big stuff. He did Judas Priest. So he had a little bit of metal background, but he hasn't really done a lot of metal stuff. But I think if I remember correctly, really the guy that kind of drove the bus on this was Neil Kernon, the engineer, because of course Neil went on to work with them for a long time. What's your perspective and thoughts about that production of that first Queensryche record, The Warning?
I always liked the production on it. And it's funny because then after working with the Queensryche guys, they were like, oh, we hate the way that record sounds.
Really?
And I was like, I guess that story was told. And apparently, James Guthrie mixed the record first, and they loved the way that mix sounded. And then they ended up having to, I guess the record label wanted to have somebody else do it. So that's where Val Garay comes into the fold.
I was going to mention that.
So they said that they always liked the original mixes better. So it's funny, I was at Michael Wilton's once when we were doing one of the records, and I brought that up, and he goes, I have the cassette of the original mix. So we put it in and I listened to it, and he goes, while we were at it, he goes, let's digitize this cassette because it's like one of the only known copies left of the James Guthrie mix.
And how was it?
It's different. It's just there's some elements that you wouldn't hear on the regular record that are a little bit louder. And like on Roads to Madness, there's like during one of the theatrical breakdowns in the end of the song, right before the climax where it gets heavy, there's some talking going on that you don't really hear on the mix that everybody has, but on the James Guthrie mix, like you can kind of, it sounds like maybe Jeff Tate's.
Yeah, you can kind of hear it if you listen to headphones when you hear the original mix, but it's definitely way low because you can't really, I remember listening to it and trying to figure out like, what is he saying? And the great thing about Spotify and Apple Music now is they have the lyrics in there, so you can go read along the lyrics. And a lot of times they'll put that stuff in there, but this wasn't in there, so I have no idea what the heck he's saying.
Yeah, so like on the James Guthrie mix, it's louder. Like you still can't really tell what he's saying, but it's louder.
Yeah,
and it's a little more interesting. And like the guitar solo has like an ending on it that isn't on one of the guitar solos during the end of the song with the fast part at the end. One of those guitar solos has like an ending. It's like on the end, and it does like a dive bomb, and that's not on the one that that everybody has heard. And there's just little things in the original mix that that James Guthrie just with mixing you can create all kinds of different moods with the parts of the recording. So he just went a little different on it. And so what everybody heard on the final one, the Val Garay one, is also different take on it.
Yeah.
And the order of the record was different too.
Interesting. Yeah, it's always interesting when people are making records and what happens, especially major labels, because they tend to stick their nose in a lot more than us independent labels do. I still love it, and it's one of those things where, because there are records that I love, and even some records that we've even put out that you want to go back and remix at some point, but the fans just don't care. It's like I'm so used to the original one, then you hear another mix, and it's different. So I'm kind of like I would love to hear that. It'd be cool if it came out, but now I'm like, well, I don't know if I would like it as much as
let me just say that the fundamentals of it are really, really close. Like if you heard it, if you weren't sure, you would be like, oh, this is like a hissy, crappy copy of the of the mix. Like somebody like had their copied the record onto a cassette or something.
Interesting, yeah. That's fascinating. I didn't know. I did not know that. Thank you for the inside information. I love that. But I do love the way it sounds. It's just interesting because again, the time it came out, like everything was like really raw and heavy, which is great. But it was still raw and heavy, but it had kind of a bit of a polish to it that I just always thought Queensryche was a very polished, very thoughtful metal band. They didn't sound like anybody else. And, each record kind of had a different sound to it as well, which was different than what a lot of the other metal bands were doing, but still absolutely brilliant.
Right. I think what made them stand out over like say an Iron Maiden, because I remember when I heard like Take Hold of the Flame, I'm like, man, these guys are like kind of like Iron Maiden, but they're a little different, Yeah. They added orchestration to their compositions.
Yes.
So, you have Michael Kamen doing orchestration work on it, which they ended up using him, going forward. But, there's string parts throughout the records, especially on Roads to Madness. It really helps the mood. And it's almost like some parts you're like, oh, it's like a moody blues almost type of sound or something with the strings,
Yeah, and it reminds me a lot of, their style of metal is more classical style, I think. So it reminds me a lot of like Rainbow, for example, because, Blackmore kind of wrote in that same thing. And he always had a lot of orchestration in his stuff, even though it might not have been actually strings, but the keyboards played that part in a lot of their stuff. So it reminds me a lot of that. And, again, these big epic songs and Roads to Madness being the biggest and the most epic of all of it. And I love songs like that where, there's a big part of the song and then you kind of slow it down and then you hit really hard with that last part, which for that time that it came out, to me, when I was first listening to it, was like uber heavy because this is, right before kind of the Metallicas and Slayers and everybody kind of came out. So that to me was like, wow, this is like really heavy.
Yeah, I think it was actually kind of ahead of its time in the metal of that time period. It really was. And I honestly think they were always ahead of their time with all their records, because then I know we're talking about, this song, but then when you hear Rage for Order, it's like, whoa, like
totally different.
Day, you're like, what were they thinking? How did they come up with that stuff?
I was lucky enough to be able to hang out with those guys a lot, especially when they toured with Metallica. So I got to spend a lot of time with them. I asked them a million questions. I'm sure they're like, shut up already. But
yeah,
they were cool.
I kind of like that too. Like when I'm working with them, there's times where, like when we're done and I pick their brains about stuff and it's very interesting, and even when they say it like this, they're like, we didn't sell a lot of records at first, comparatively in the industry. They were like the record labels were usually like, oh, it's not selling. Even though back then, like 200,000 records now would be like, holy crap, But back then it was like, that's not that good, And it's like, I guess from what they told me there, it took a while for people to catch on to their albums as they came out.
Yeah, because they were doing something very different. Like what they were doing was a very progressive, different style of metal. You had Jeff Tate's vocals, and not a lot of bands were doing that. And certainly not a lot of bands were doing that were selling a lot of records either. So, but that's why I love them, because they were different. They sounded unique. They had their own sound to them, which is I always loved. And they were also very, because it comes across all their records where it comes across as very, very cerebral, very smart. I hate to say that word, but kind of smart. And the lyrics are always very interesting and kind of different than what a lot of other metal bands were doing. And I always liked that. And just even hanging out with those guys, it's weird because when I was hanging out with them back then in like the late 90s, it's mostly with Jeff, Scott, and Chris. And Eddie and Michael were kind of more shy, and I didn't hang out with them as much. But the other three guys I hung out with a lot, and they were really interesting because, there's a bunch of metalheads talking about metal, but we talked about all sorts of other issues and stuff, which I always really liked. That like, oh, these guys are really smart. And then of course I got to know Michael and Eddie later, and also super great guys. So a bunch of very smart musicians.
Right. Yeah. I met Chris one time over at Michael's house. So, we chatted for a little bit, but I wasn't able to like get into any deep conversations with him. And I've never met Jeff. And I worked with Scott on the first record that I did with him, Condition Human. I had the three kind of core guys on that one. And just the way they think, it's just, they all have a little thing that they put into the pot. And you stir it up, and that's what comes out. And it's like each guy's their own ingredient, and they're all very special.
Yeah, and I think that's why they're so unique, because you've got all these different personalities and also different types of songwriters. Like, Michael kind of writes the heavier stuff, but it's all over the place, and they're all putting their little. They say too many chefs in the kitchen sometimes ruin the meal, but I say with Queensryche it actually helps it, because everybody's kind of adding their own little spikes to it, which makes it really interesting and very different too.
And you know what? They still do that today, to this day. Like each guy, and even with, the addition to like Mike Stone, who was actually in the band before, but now he's back. We have a thing called the Reichian way, which is our little nod to like when they come up with a riff or whatever. Like I'll look at Michael, I'll look at Stoney. We call him Stoney. We say it's very Reichian, because we really like. Well, first of all, they went through a period where they weren't very guitar driven, like in the 2000s and all that stuff. Yep. And then when I started working with them, I was like, the first thing I wanted to do was bring back the guitars. So that was like one of my things that I immediately wanted to do with the band.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I wanted double solos back. And, it gets to a point now where the arrangement might need something. I'll go to Michael, I'll go, it needs something here. And he goes, what, a double solo? I go, yep. And he's like, I'm like, get to work. They're so good at crafting like the double solos and all that stuff. It's just, it comes so natural to them. And every time they create one, I'm like, I can't believe they came up with this. It's just so melodic and fits the song so well. You're like, wow, how do they do that? And it's like, I play guitar myself, but when they show me something, I'm like, and they both play it together. They'll sit there and they can play it note for note. So it's not like they're piecing it together or any of that stuff. Like they play the whole thing through.
Yeah, and you've got the addition of Casey Grillo, which is, I think, kind of the final piece that makes it so good, because that's what I really loved about that Digital Noise Alliance record. It's just, again, it sounds to me like classic Queensryche. Every song on that record is amazing. I was obsessed with that record for a long time when it came out. And Casey's amazing, because, when you're filling Scott Rockenfeld's shoes, that's not an easy thing to do.
Right.
And he comes across it, especially on that record, I think, like, wow, this guy's really, like, he's really, really good. But I saw them in Key West at this festival down there. I was hanging out with them after the show. And I asked Michael Wilton, I go, so after 30 years, how do you come up with this unbelievable record? Like, what happened? And he just said, COVID. I go, okay, I get it. Everybody was angry and mad and nothing to do during COVID. So they're all making tremendous art, it's just such a great record. And again, I implore you, if you're Queensryche fans, which I would imagine you are if you listen to this podcast, listen to that record if you haven't. It's amazing.
So with that record, that was the first one where they brought me in right off the bat, and we got together from the first day, and I basically was with them the entire time, because we felt like we wanted to have like the guys more as a unit on that one, together more, instead of not that they weren't on the other ones, but it was more like each guy was bringing things to the table, and then we would work on it, and then other guys would kind of contribute and put some stuff on top of it or whatnot, and then you got the arrangements and all that stuff. But this one, it was like everybody was kind of around for the whole creation. We were sitting in a room, and then even like Casey, he goes, I got an idea. And he comes up to the keyboard, starts playing a melody over something. It's like, so it could have been anybody at the time with some of these songs. They were on fire, and they were just coming up with a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's a really, really great record. Such a great record. Well, dude, I cannot thank you enough for doing this. It was great to see you, and thank you for doing this. And I appreciate you. I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon.
Definitely. I'd love to come on again. Pick another band, man.
I will. Hey everyone, Brian Slagel here, founder of Metal Blade Records. I spent my whole entire life trying to make metal history and make metal better and promote metal as much as I can. And now there's a brand new way for you to test your metal knowledge and relive those iconic moments. It's called Metal Mondays, the official metal trivia game from Metal Blade and Pantheon Media, and it's free to play right now. Every Monday, a new game drops. From Slayer, Supremacy to Death, Metal 101, 80s, Metal Blade Classics, and tons more. You'll battle it out on the leaderboards, win killer prizes, and even score some exclusive Metal Blade merch. So if you think you know your riffs, your legends, and your deep cuts, prove it. Download, hit replay on the App Store or Google Play, or head to metalbladerecords.com/Metal Mondays and start playing today. Because in metal, there's no off days. Only Metal Mondays.
Expedia and Visit Scotland invite you to come experience the beauty that awaits in Scotland. The sweep of wild coastlines, quiet locks and untamed landscapes. Fresh cuisine that feels rooted in the land. Come experience the kind of stillness that stays with you long after you leave. Plan your Scottish escape today at expedia.com/visit Scotland.
You may think you know McDonald's drinks, but you don't know them like this. From fruity refreshers like the Strawberry Watermelon Refresher and the Mango Pineapple Refresher with popping boba, to crafted sodas like the Sprite Berry Blast with berry-flavored Sprite topped with cold foam. Who knew ice-cold drinks could be so fire? 6 all-new drinks are here. Try them all, now at McDonald's. Refreshers contain caffeine.
This episode is brought to you by Tidy Cats, here to level up your litter game with their new Performance Plus lineup. Your home is your happy place, your cats, VIPs. So when it comes to the litter box, excellence isn't optional. Choose from products that specialize in max power clumping, low tracking, or odor fighting so advanced, stink won't see it coming. Tidy Cats Performance Plus. Mission mighty, keep it tidy. Shop now at tidycats.com.
Metal Mondays. Play loud, play true, and play to win. We welcome in a certified hockey expert. He's been involved in hockey for many, many years as a broadcaster, as a media guy, as an editor, and he created the College Hockey News, which is the preeminent place to go to get college hockey information. So clearly he knows everything about hockey, including college hockey, and huge Queensryche fan. Mr. Adam Wodon, how are you, sir?
Thanks for having me, Brian. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Same here, man. Always good to talk hockey and metal. We'll talk metal first, of course. So Queensryche, we've not talked about Queensryche on this podcast yet, which is criminal because I'm a massive fan. You know, we're kind of coming towards the end here. We're in the last 20 episodes now. So I was like, okay, we got to get Queensryche in. And I know you're a huge fan, so we've been talking about doing this for a while. So I got you in, and it's a track that I don't know that most people would expect us to talk about, but I'm a massive Queensryche fan, as are you. And this is both of our favorite songs. So here we are talking about Roads to Madness. Where did you first discover Queensryche?
That is a great question. It's funny because back when I was in high school in the 80s, we had a radio station at our school, which was, fairly big, whatever. And I was trying to be a sports play-by-play guy, but that was like too easy. So I needed something more of a challenge. So I started Metal Monday, the Metal Monday show in the 80s. And I didn't have a big collection at that point. So I had a friend of mine put some songs on a couple tapes, and 2 of them were Walk in the Shadows and Take Hold of the Flame. And I was like, whoa, what the heck is this? That was the best stuff on there. I thought it was awesome. And this was like months before Mindcrime came out. So that prompted me and some of my friends to get Mindcrime the day it came out. And we just devoured that thing, picked it apart to shreds. But once I started doing that, I'm like, I got to go back. And I just, at that point, bought everything that Queensryche did. And then I was like, holy smokes, So as it turns out, we spent the entire first year of college listening to nothing but Mindcrime. Then there was a subset of us who were like, wait a minute, we love The Warning and Rage for Order. So those two quickly became, as much as I think Mindcrime is tremendous on its own level, the first 2 LPs to me are off the charts. What I feel like is premier Queensryche.
Yeah, and their first 3 records, including the EP before that, were just, 3 of the best first 3 records of a metal band ever. I mean, they were just so good. Quick funny story about my Queensryche thing. So I was working at the record store when the EP came out. So we were selling a lot of the EP. It was amazing. And they played the Country Club, which is the local place where we played back in the early 80s. So I went to see them, and they were so bad. I don't ever walk out on shows. It was so bad, I walked out. That's how bad it was. And it wasn't really their fault. It was the PA was screwed up, and I just, every technical thing could possibly go wrong went wrong, and they were kind of off. And so I was like, that's really a bummer because I really liked the EP. So then I was in England in 84, and Dio was playing. I talk about it in my book and everywhere else, but so one of my greatest 10 days of my life. I saw Dio twice at Hammersmith Odeon, and then Iron Maiden twice at Hammersmith Odeon, when they're recording the World Slavery Tour record. But anyway, so I saw Dio, and I was talking to these kids. We called them punters back then. Right. And they were all like, hey, what do you think about Queensryche? And I go, you know what? Because they were opening. And I go, I love the EP. I saw them once, and they weren't very good, but I'm going to have an open mind. This is about 2 weeks before The Warning came out. Right. And of course, they come on and play a lot of The Warning stuff, and they're incredible. And I've gone on to be a massive fan about that. But to retract really quick to that show at the Country Club, I became really good friends with those guys, especially when they were out on the road with Metallica, because I went to a ton of those shows. And
that's when I first saw them, actually, 1980.
Yeah.
Opening for Metallica, so.
But I became really good friends with them because, Metallica would play and then, they would do, they'd eat and shower and everything. So it's like 2 hours before they come out to hang out. So I just hang out with the Queensryche guys after all the shows, and super good guys. And one night, we'd had a few drinks and I said, do you guys remember that show you did at the Country Club in LA? And they go, yeah. I go, I left that show because it was so bad. They go, oh, we know. Probably the worst show we ever did, but they came around. And so with Queensryche too, like I mentioned, the first 3 records are so great. And of course, everybody goes to Mindcrime, which is an absolute masterpiece, brilliant. And we could have talked about a million different Queensryche songs, but I'm glad that you picked Roads to Madness because it's my personal favorite too. And that was such an integral song for their career. And just, it was so different at the time too, because it was a very progressive song. And this is before, a little bit before Fate's Warning, or right around the same time as Fate's Warning, and before Dream Theater really got into the whole prog metal thing. And here you have this almost 10-minute long song that's just kind of all over the place.
I love those epics, like I know you're an Iron Maiden fan and it's similar. And people sometimes equate Queensryche to Maiden. I think there's enough differences there where it's not, we're ripping them off, but just those epic songs, I mean, actually Roads to Madness reminds me a lot, obviously a completely different song, but Rocket Queen by Guns N' Roses, we're just crescendos and then at the end just goes bananas, that same kind of, just any song like that, I'm always appeals to me. But, Take Hold of the Flame was probably the quote unquote more popular song from that album. But, Roads to Madness is definitely a song that they would play on tour. So it's not like it was completely obscure. And I just think everything that Queensryche was becoming or going to be is in there. And it's pretty formative already. But I mean, just so all the components people would see later on in Mindcrime are already in there in terms of lyrical content. And, the double guitars and the way they're playing. I mean, I always say in hockey, I'm not the X's and O's guy. I know hockey pretty well. And in music, I know enough to top. I couldn't tell you intricate details of playing guitar, but I can sort of hear it where it's not just 2 guitars playing rhythm and lead. I mean, they're bouncing off of each other in really cool ways that just is right in my wheelhouse, and it's just all there in that one song. And Take Hold is awesome too. I love the entire album, but it's, like I said, start to finish, even the thematic content, the lyrics. I mean, Jeff was, for whatever age he was at the time, I think he was around 24 or so, just amazing. And, again, people heard that later with Mindcrime, what that became. But the lyrics on the first 2 LPs they hold up to this day, in terms of thematic content. I mean, you look at some of the stuff on The Warning, and it's like, AI is being discussed, and fascism, stuff that he would, eventually talk about more on Mindcrime. It's so mature for that first LP.
100%. And they were very smart, bright guys and super fun to hang out with back then. But yeah, that was what made them different is that style of music wasn't particularly, like I said, the progressive sort of thing. I mean, yeah, you had Maiden and you had a lot of Jethro Tull back to the 70s and everything else. But this was, something new and different. And you're right, the lyrics were really different from what anybody else was doing. It wasn't just the standard sorcery, historical, all these different things. You're right, it's very political. And there's all sorts of really interesting angles that he had. This song in particular, I think, is a setup for Mindcrime. My only frustration with Jeff was great guy. We hung out a lot back in those days. And every once in a while I go like, okay, tell me what the song is about. He go, well, it's about whatever you think it's about.
I always hate that.
Same thing with Mindcrime. I go, come on, tell me the story. And, even when we had a few drinks, like, tell me the story. He's like, nope, it's whatever you think it is. And if that's what you think it is, I mean, I understand that because there's a lot of lyricists will do that and say, it's whatever you want it to mean. But I'm like, no, I want to know what you think it is.
Yeah, right. No, it always drives me crazy too. And obviously, I haven't gotten to meet him. I'm glad to hear you say he's a nice guy because obviously things have happened over the last 10 years that have caused people to be like, what's going on with Queensryche? So I'm glad to hear that. My only run-in with Jeff Tate, actually, I didn't say hi to him, was at a bar in Seattle. Cliche enough to say that in 1998. Believe it or not, I was walking out of a Mariners game at the Kingdome just before the new stadium opened. Kim Thale from Soundgarden was walking out next to me. I'm like, turn to my wife. I'm like, what? And we go about a block down to a bar and Jeff Tate's sitting in the bar. I'm like, what is going on?
Seattle royalty up there.
I didn't say hello to either one of them. I don't like to do that. But anyway, yeah. I mean, look, the lyrics, it all goes together. That to me is the beauty of the music. And again, I'm not an expert on, actually writing music or anything, but you can tell when something goes together like that. Again, it's just kind of right in my wheelhouse. And Jeff's ability to, again, like he says, he doesn't want to say what it's about, but I mean, it's a lot of it seems fairly clear to me politically, just about, again, man versus machines is probably a theme in like 2 or 3 of the songs on those first 2 albums.
Yep.
And that's pretty relevant to today, Like you said, is there a consistent story like Mindcrime start to finish? No, but it's pretty thematically put together pretty well.
Yeah, and they were like, a lot of people called them the thinking man's metal or whatever, which, I get, because the lyrics are sophisticated. Even the music was more sophisticated than what a lot of other bands were doing at the time. I hate when, people put labels on things. I know bands hate that. And I'm the same way with you. I can't play one note of anything or any sort of musical thing, but I know what I like. And right. I think that this song in particular was really important just because of, again, not only the epicness of it and the style and what the lyrics were talking about, but the whole end part was, for that time, I was pretty heavy. That was like pretty fast and pretty heavy. And we're basically just about predating, early Slayer and Metallica and the heavy stuff that would eventually become from those bands. And that was I remember listening to that song when I first started going, man, that's pretty intense, especially that ending part is pretty out of control. And I love, this is what I've always said about a lot of different bands in regarding to like what's heavy and what's not heavy. Bands that set up stuff like that. If there's like a little mild refrain or a little mellowness before, and then you get hit in the head really hard with something, that makes that much more heavier than if it's just, 1,000 miles an hour for the whole song. And that's
100%.
You really see that on this one.
I happen to be a huge, 90s rock guy too. So Smashing Pumpkins are big for me. And the way that they layer stuff and the way they go, soft, hard, I mean, to me is very similar. So like, that's also one of my favorite bands for that exact reason, that kind of dynamic. And when it kicks in, like you said, that's like 7 minutes into the song. And, it's, it builds for a long time. It's very moody early on. I love Eddie Jackson's bass lines in that song are tremendous. I'm a huge Rock and Field guy, which is, again, Jimmy Chamberlain's Smashing Pumpkins. I mean, that's why, to me, a lot of that goes together. So just all of it, his drum style, again, I couldn't really articulate it probably, but it's so unique to me what he was doing.
100%. I mean, they're all of them really had their own uniqueness in what they were doing back then, especially Scott. I mean, just incredible drummer. And you're right about Pumpkins. I mean, I love the Pumpkins too. And Billy's a huge metalhead. And in fact, one of his biggest favorite bands of all time are Merciful Fate and King Diamond. So you can see some of that stuff creep into what they were doing. Of course, he couldn't say that back.
He's lumped in with the the grunge crowd. But if you listen to him, he's a huge metal guy.
All those grunge bands, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, I mean, Nirvana, they were all huge metalheads. I mean, Dave Grohl's a massive metalhead, but they weren't allowed to say it back at the time because like metal was dead back then. And I get it. It's all fine. But all those bands were massively influenced by metal for sure.
Which is why, if you ignore the marketing nonsense, which is why I love them. I always hate when the 80s metal guys and the 90s rock crowd argue with each other. I'm like, come on, can't we just love both of this stuff?
I mean, I loved all that 90s grunge stuff. I mean, we worked with a lot of those bands. We worked with Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and a bunch of those bands. So, it's just heavy music. It doesn't matter what the envelope comes in, right? It's just all really good, heavy music. And of course, all of these bands in Queensryche, I mean, Queensryche being from Seattle had a massive influence. I mean, all of those bands were big fans of Queensryche because that was one of the first, really the first, aside from Heart, obviously, coming up from Seattle. They were the first heavier band that came from Seattle and made it big and stayed in Seattle. They didn't like leave and, go somewhere else when they were making it big.
It's funny that you mentioned that because Heart was probably my first favorite group. And the influence that I didn't even know at the time that they were having on some of these bands, especially vocally. Anne, and the whatever trainer she used to work with, and I don't, Jeff and it's very operatic as well, and of course Chris Cornell. So when people are like, oh, it was just Seattle, the marketing. I mean, just ignore all that. I can't help it. The fact that they're all from Seattle. I don't know what it is what it was in the water up there.
Something in the water up there, especially vocally. I mean, look, all those whether it's Chris Cornell or Jeff Tate or
Wayne.
I mean, all of them were incredible vocalists. I know that Jeff was a big fan of Ann Wilson as well from Heart, and I know those two ended up becoming friends. I think Queensryche did some shows with Heart at some point, because when you listen to Ann Wilson and you listen to anybody that came after Heart in that style, they all owe a lot of debt to her, because she was one of the first ones, because she was female, she could sing that high.
Right.
But when you go back now at all of those kind of singers, she was one of the first ones to really do it.
Well, I was going to say too, and another reason why, the first two albums, again, the LPs I'm talking about, not the EP, but lump that in as well. But to me, that's peak vocals for Jeff as well. Like, even with Mindcrime, I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but he wasn't quite singing that way. And then as it got to the subsequent albums, I think his voice was not as strong. Again, you might say maybe it was intentional style change, but I mean, when to go to like the 90s and Empire album and stuff like that, it wasn't the same. I actually saw him recently and I thought he sounded fantastic, but there was a period of time where I think maybe he wasn't taking care of his voice as much. I don't know.
Well, he did smoke back then. But
yeah,
then
exactly.
Again, a million lead vocalists smoke. I still see people that sound amazing in smoke, which I just don't understand that. But I think what happened with Jeff was, specifically with Mindcrime, was he's telling a story. And when he's telling a story, I think he wanted people to hear the lyrics and understand the lyrics, and really, because when you're screaming and stuff, like especially Roads to Madness, until I actually read the lyrics, I didn't know half of what he was saying. And so that, like, the door opened, like what? But
I do love that style, though. Whatever the case may be from that. So obviously, Empire was not nearly the same kind of style at all.
And they matured too as a band, and I think they went in a little bit of a different direction. Look, the 90s, especially the early 90s, was just weird for everything. So I get it. And then, of course, they just kind of fell off the planet after that, which is unfortunate. But I think with Mindcrime, I know specifically talking to him and seeing him talk about this before, I think he was telling a story there. And I think the vocal style was more that way because of the storytelling. Whereas the first two records, I mean, there's great stories in there. It's not quite the same.
I'll trust you on that one. I'm just saying, I've seen them a lot. I used to see every tour there was. And, even singing Take Hold of the Flame, which is obviously one of the most difficult songs probably to sing, you just could see that it was harder and harder for him. And I actually thought, like I said, he kind of has rebounded in recent years. So whatever the case may be. But like I said, that style just is right in my wheelhouse, which is why I appreciated you allowing me, I guess, to talk about Roads to Madness as opposed to some of the more popular songs that people may know.
Yeah, it's always a struggle when you're trying to do this, because, for me, it's like I want to talk about the songs I love, but I also have to realize that there are people out there that might be going, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But I think specifically this song was important because, again, I'm trying to, it's 100 songs that define heavy metal, and I'm trying to pick songs that did define heavy metal. I think this is a really important song for, like I mentioned earlier, it was different. It was long. It was epic. His vocal style was still not, Maiden was obviously out there, and there was a bunch of other bands, but he was doing it a little bit differently. And look, they had a massive impact on the world of heavy metal, just because they were different and they were more mature, like we mentioned earlier. And, just such an amazing band. And to me, this song, it's in my all-time top 10.
Absolutely. And I've debated myself like a zillion times which one I like better, The Warning or Rage for Order. The Warning has 9 songs and Rage, I think, has 11. And so there's just the only way I can say it is that there's 2 or 3 I might skip on Rage, and none of them I'll skip on The Warning. That's really the only difference, honestly, because they're both incredible. And the interesting thing, too, about Roads to Madness is, as a Queensryche buff, it's the last song on the album, obviously, and that started a trend for them of like ending their albums with these majestic songs. Not all of them are 9 minutes, but if you go to Queensryche fans always talk about the last song on every album, like straight up through Promised Land into the 90s, when, you had a song like Someone Else, which was, again, not nearly the same kind of thing, but it was just an interesting closer. Eyes of a Stranger, obviously, and Anybody Listening, which was on the Empire album. I mean, these kind of majestic songs. So I assume that's intentional.
Yeah, I mean, there's an art to that. I mean, closing songs are always really important, and you have to have something there that kind of, wraps up the record, but also is something really strong and different. I mean, look, Maiden's adopted we're going to do, the big, epic, long song stand the records, which of course I love, and they're my favorite band. So And Queensryche did some of that as well, but they were always trying to be a little bit different too, which I really always appreciated that, where, certainly took bits and pieces from a lot of metal bands, but they were doing things that weren't, especially at the time, considered metal necessarily, especially Rage to Order. There's some stuff on there that was like, oh, okay, I love that record, but there's some people that go like, oh, it's not as heavy as Warning or Mindcrime, but it's like, it's still a great record. There's still some really incredibly heavy stuff on there.
I told you my favorite song might be, actually, as much as I love everything on The Warning, The Whisper, which is the third song on Rage for Order, because it's a short song, but it really highlights Scott Rockenfield's drumming. That's what I love about it. So it's just got this cool beat to it. And I mean, look, you can go top to bottom. I could sit here all day talking, picking apart every song.
No, I mean, they were great. And Scott's like, one of the best metal drummers of all time. It really is kind of sad that they've kind of disintegrated. Yeah. But that being said, the band they have now is great. And Todd LaTorre is a phenomenal singer and a super great dude too. And their last record is amazing. Like to me, that's the best record they've made in 30 years. And I couldn't believe how good that record was. Oh my God, that record's awesome.
I think they're working on another one, if I saw that recently. But they also had two others after Jeff left as well that were also pretty good as far as I was concerned. I saw them play, I think it was 2019. They had an album called The Verdict. They were on tour for that. I thought it was tremendous. Obviously it's only 2 of the 5 now. So I thought they sounded great. I thought when Scott left, that was sort of, I don't want to say the last straw because that sounds dramatic, like I, have anything. It's not their fault. But with him no longer in the band, it's like, that was like the last, when it's only 2 of the 5, it's harder for me to, go to the shows. And
I agree. And I think that was kind of part of the problem was, what do you do when a guy like that leaves? It's hard to replace them. And that's why I really like the last record, because Casey Grillo is a phenomenal drummer. And that's the first record that I noticed since Scott left. It's like, oh, this guy's really good. And he adds so much to it. No disrespect to the drummers they had prior to this. But that was what really ramped it up for me, is like, oh, this drummer is really, really good. So,
and certainly what I'm saying is no disrespect to him either. Right? I mean, he's tremendous, but it's just for me as a fan of 40 years to not hear Scott there anymore. It's again, I'll go back, I've seen the Smashing Pumpkins without Jimmy Chamberlain, and it's just not quite the same.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's the way it is with so many bands, and I'm still struggling to warm up to the new Iron Maiden drummer. And I've seen some stuff where, he's definitely getting a lot better. I haven't seen him live yet, but some of the footage I've seen. So, but it's going to be different. You lose people that are iconic drummers like that. It's very difficult to replace them.
Yeah, like I said, it's nothing against those guys, right? It's just sort of a different band. But I mean, look, Eddie and Michael are tremendous players, and they're going to write great music, and I admire it from that perspective. And if they came around, I would go see it. I just, like I said, just saw Jeff. He's got his like band of 30 somethings playing with him, doing the whole Mindcrime album, and then he went back and did some older stuff, and again, I thought it was tremendous. So
yeah, I haven't seen him for a minute. Whenever he's in a town I'm in, I miss him by like 1 or 2 days. But I've seen a bunch of footage, and he sounds amazing again. So I'm like really happy to see that.
My wife wanted to go to Vail that weekend. We were here in Denver, and I'm like, I can't miss the show. So I drove her up to Vail, drove back down to downtown Denver, went to the show, and then drove back up. So it was interesting. It's still amazing that I can sit there and basically sing every lyric of the Mindcrime album. So.
that's not a bad thing, and that's commitment. I like that, going driving up and back.
Yes,
but I can't have you on without talking about a little bit of hockey. So let me know what's the latest and what's happening in the world of college hockey. When do we get more West Coast teams? That's what I want to know.
Go check out collegehockeynews.com for all the latest. Is all I can say. Pitch that one in there, but the season just ended, obviously, for college. The NHL still going on, but there's a massive amount of craziness going on right now in the NCAA, and it's really too long of a story to get into. That's why I genuinely suggest people read what I have up there right now.
Sure. So I'll ask a couple quick questions to be more specific.
Yeah.
So is the NIL affecting the world of college hockey now as much as it is football and other sports?
It's all relative. They're not getting, backup safeties are making $500,000 in college football. I mean, that's not happening. But first round draft picks in college hockey are probably 125,000 is probably the going rate. Porter Martone, who just played at Michigan State for 1 year, jumped right into the NHL playoffs and has been great. He's been tremendous. I think was closer to 250,000. He got that after he was drafted last year. So That's what you're talking about. But you also have to be careful with the money. Hockey is such a team building culture kind of sport. You don't want to upend your locker room. So coaches are really navigating this all right now. My background is in the East with the smaller schools and the Ivy schools. So everything that happens, I look at through a lens of how it affects them. And that to me is like the shame of it, because no one thinks about that. Like when they think about, like the kids are getting money, great. But a lot of these schools can't afford that kind of thing. And, hockey's only 63 schools and there's only 6 Big Ten schools that play. So you're talking about maybe 2 or 3 other Power 4 schools that play. And so you're talking about most of the teams struggling to keep up with that kind of thing. And it just, the rich get richer kind of thing, which people are bristling about and worried about.
Yeah, that's happening everywhere in college sports. But that being said, Denver, which is a pretty small school, has won 3 of the last 4 championships. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they have the same budget as Michigan State or Penn State does.
Not quite, but believe it or not, it's pretty good. And part of that is because the success that they've had has enabled them to sort of fundraise off of that. But it is more difficult for sure. But also, they should be given a lot of credit because, again, what I was just saying, it's easy to go buy a player, quote unquote, for $125,000. Not as easy to say, look, we're not going to do that. We're going to sort of maybe give everybody 25, 30,000. And if you don't want to play here under those conditions, then don't come here. And to say like, this is our culture and we build a team. And they're able to get away with that a little bit because they do have some resources and they do have a history of success, but they're doing it as right as possible. So, college sports is just in a weird place. The NCAA is like constantly getting sued for everything and losing. So things seem to change daily. And a lot of coaches, as I was telling you off air beforehand, retiring because they don't want to deal with this stuff anymore. It's a lot different for them now when you can change schools as fast as you can change your underwear.
Yeah, the portal and everything. I mean, they're going to have to fix that up, I think. I mean, we see it in college hockey and college football, and you see it everywhere else. So real quick, again, me being West Coast guy, we've got Arizona State out here now. Now we've got Oklahoma State, which is theoretically. I've been talking to people out here on the West Coast for years, and, there's all these different, you hear about Utah, you hear about Arizona, you hear about USC, you hear about Colorado, obviously, a bunch of money has to be spent. Is there any possibility that there's going to be more West Coast Division I college hockey teams in the next 5 years, let's say?
Without getting too far in the weeds on this, I'll just give you the general sentiment, which is I've actually talked to the Arizona, because a lot of these schools have club programs, which are not varsity, not affiliated with the NCAA.
UNLV here in Vegas.
But they're very popular.
Won championships. Yeah, they've done very well.
Exactly. So the students on campus will go and they have a great time. And even though it's like, not the Division I kids, it's still a fun time. And they get like 4,000 fans. Arizona just built a new arena. But I asked the coach there and he's like, there's no way. Because of all the money, right? Yeah. Hockey's an expensive sport. And when all these schools that are in Power 4 conferences are focused on giving money to football and basketball players, it's hard for them to justify adding another sport like hockey when you also have to build like $100 million arena. Well, in Arizona's case, they don't. But I think to answer your question quickly, that the sentiment is that if there's going to be expansion in that guard, it'll be more like a school that doesn't really have football to worry about, like Gonzaga, for example, which is a pretty good school. Like I've always said, I love the University of Washington. Give me an excuse to go up to Seattle. But Gonzaga, which is up there as well, probably has a better chance of that. So that's the kind of stuff everyone's talking about. So it might be not as sexy to the general hockey fan, but that's really what you're looking at these days.
Fair enough. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you letting me dabble in that for a minute. And thank you so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate it. You were great and super fun, and enjoy next college hockey season and Queensryche all the time.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, there you have it. Another fun episode talking Queensryche, which I love to do, and we have not done enough here. Thanks to our guest, Mr. Adam Wodon from College Hockey News, and a huge Queensryche fan. Zeuss, the producer, who's produced the last 3 Queensryche records and a million others, as I mentioned earlier. Our theme music is by Lizzie Borden, and the man that keeps it all going and all together and all wise, all seeing, all knowing, Mr. Christian Blatt. Thanks, and we'll see you guys next episode.
One Listen to The Lion Women of Tehran by Marjan Kamali, set in Tehran, Iran, and praised by Oprah Daily as a tender, beautiful examination of two women and their choices over more than 30 years. The Lion Women of Tehran is available on Spotify or wherever audiobooks are sold.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.